Freeze. You're under arrest for illegal flower planting. The woman in tactical gear shouted at my wife like she'd just uncovered a cartel boss. Tracy knelt in our yard, terrified, while 3 badge-wearing strangers cuffed her for planting yellow marigolds. I stood frozen, watching our quiet weekend turn into a live-stream circus. Neighbors cheered, calling me a rogue federal agent. They had no idea they'd just made the worst mistake of their lives. In less than 90 minutes, this so-called flower crime would ignite the most viral neighborhood meltdown ever, and I'd expose a secret that would ruin them all. I've spent 18 years in federal law enforcement, tracking fugitives, serving warrants, and testifying in high-stakes cases. But nothing prepared me for what happened when my wife decided to plant flowers at our cabin. That innocent act spiraled into the strangest confrontation of my career. Fake police, live-streamed arrests, and one grief-stricken woman convinced she was saving the world, one HOA violation at a time. It started on what should have been a peaceful Saturday morning, but ended with me revealing my true identity to save Tracy from suburban madness. Let's rewind 2 hours. Friday evening, early October, Tracy and I drove up to our cabin in the mountains outside Denver. No work, no calls, no city noise, just us. She'd picked up a tray of bright yellow marigolds on the way, saying the front bed looked too empty. That was so her, always fixing what looked unloved. As a third-grade teacher, nurturing came naturally, whether it was kids or flower beds. Saturday morning was perfect Colorado, crisp, silent, sunlight spilling across the porch. I made coffee while she slipped into her old sweatshirt and dirt-stained jeans. Around 8 a.m., she went outside with her little trowel, humming while planting each flower. Watching her from the kitchen window, I thought, this is it. This is peace. Then I noticed her. Across the street stood a woman with binoculars, watching Tracy like an undercover agent. Late 40s, white polo, khakis, clipboard in one hand, jotting notes every few minutes. Who does that at 8 a.m.? Tracy waved politely, but the woman lowered the binoculars and disappeared inside. Honey, Tracy called through the window, that lady keeps staring at us. It's creepy. Just ignore her, I said, squeezing her shoulder. Some people have too much free time. That was my first mistake. I deal with real criminals, people who traffic drugs, move weapons, destroy lives. A nosy neighbor didn't even register as a threat. But I was about to learn that the most dangerous people are the ones convinced they're heroes, armed with just enough obsession and zero real authority. Had I trusted Tracy's gut, maybe the rest could have been avoided. But I brushed it off, never imagining that by noon, that same woman would return with a camera, a measuring tape, and 3 imposters posing as officials, turning our quiet yard into a crime scene. Her name was Laura Thompson, and she'd been planning this rescue for months. She believed Tracy was in danger, that I was the threat, and that she was the savior. It wasn't true, none of it, but grief had twisted her. 2 years earlier, a young woman named Emma, who looked eerily like Tracy, died in a crash Laura blamed on men who broke the rules. But back then, all I saw was a strange neighbor with binoculars. 1 hour later, she'd be marching across the street, leading her imaginary task force, and our perfect morning would dissolve into the most surreal showdown of my life. I should have recognized the warning signs. Instead, I wrote her off, and gave her just enough time to burn everything down. She traded her binoculars for a bright yellow measuring tape, a heavy camera that looked straight out of a crime scene, and a clipboard stacked with official papers. 2 strangers followed, one woman in a security uniform and a nervous young man trying too hard to look important. "Excuse me," Laura called in a voice that was both polite and menacing. "I need to document these flowers for the violation report." Tracy froze mid-planting, dirt on her hands, confusion on her face. I set down my coffee and walked outside just as Laura began snapping photos from every angle, crouching, circling, narrating into her phone like she was logging evidence for the FBI. "Front yard landscaping with non-approved species planted without review committee consent," she said, each click of the shutter more aggressive than the last. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "there must be some mistake. We're just planting flowers." Laura straightened, her eyes sharp with condescension. Article 47B of the Community Standards clearly states that all landscaping changes require pre-approval from the Architectural Review Committee, she declared, flashing a laminated sheet. "These flowers violate subsection 3, non-native species visible from the street. The woman in uniform nodded like Laura had just cited federal law, while the young guy scribbled notes. Tracy stood, brushing dirt from her jeans. We were never told about any committee when we bought this cabin. Are you sure those rules even apply here? Laura's answer was to take 17 more photos. Click, click, click. Ignorance of the standards is not a defense, she said flatly. Then came the line that should have set every alarm bell ringing. You have 2 hours to remove these unauthorized plantings or I'll initiate enforcement action. That's when the young man stepped forward. His navy blue uniform bore patches reading Certified Security Professional and Community Standards Enforcement. A radio on his shoulder crackled as he said, Rob Williams, Community Security Supervisor. We're here to support Mrs. Thompson in her coordinator role. The older woman introduced herself as Margaret, a retired teacher turned documentation assistant. Just like that, one strange neighbor had turned into a full-blown task force with badges, clipboards, and way too much confidence. Look, I said, fighting the urge to laugh, there's been a misunderstanding. We're not in an HOA. This is unincorporated county land. Laura's face didn't change, but Rob and Margaret shared the kind of look bureaucrats give when they've rehearsed for this. The community standards apply to all residents within the designated area, Laura replied, already dialing her phone. Jim, it's happening. Bring Margaret. Yes, right now. The situation is escalating. She hung up and smiled at me, part pity, part triumph. I really hoped it wouldn't come to this, she said. But some people only follow the rules when they're forced to. Tracy moved closer, tension humming off her. Years of teaching had trained her to spot unhinged behavior instantly. Josh, she whispered, maybe we should just pull the flowers and deal with this later. But I was still thinking like an agent. When someone threatens authority they don't have, you call the bluff. We're not removing anything, I told Laura. If you've got real paperwork, show it. Her smile tightened. The paperwork is on its way, she said, then turned to Tracy with a soft, unsettling tone. Honey, I know this is scary. You don't have to protect him anymore. Help is coming. Tracy blinked. Protect him from what? She asked. But Laura was already walking away, talking into her phone again, leaving us with her fake enforcement crew, now looking strangely self-assured. What just happened? Tracy asked. I didn't know. It felt like we'd stumbled into someone else's delusion, an amateur crime scene run by people playing dress-up. Rob circled our truck, jotting notes, while Margaret hovered near the flower bed as if measuring guilt. Every scratch of their pens sounded like another small theft of our privacy. But something in Laura's tone lingered, an undercurrent of grief and obsession that told me this wasn't just about marigolds. I told Tracy we should go inside, wait for the paperwork, and hope reality caught up before things got worse. They had no real authority over us, so once we ignored them, they'd usually pack up their clipboards and move on. But as we reached our door, I heard Laura on the phone again, her tone different this time. Quieter. Strained. She looks just like Emma, she said. I can't let it happen again. Not again. I didn't know who Emma was, but the way she said it made my skin crawl. Within the hour, real officers believed I was a threat, and I was too slow to see the turn. By the time I realized what was happening, Tracy was gone, for her safety. Laura's mistake was not checking which agency I actually worked for. Chapter 3, the live stream trap. 43 minutes later, a real police cruiser pulled up outside. Not security, not HOA volunteers, an actual county deputy, badge catching sunlight, radio crackling. The sight made my stomach drop. Laura had convinced law enforcement that we were criminals. Tracy gripped my arm. Josh, she whispered, trembling, why are the police here over flowers? The deputy introduced himself as Jim Patterson, off duty but responding to a domestic report filed by Laura Thompson, who apparently knew his wife from church. He had that calm authority of someone used to breaking up family fights. But what unsettled me most was the folder he carried, paperwork giving him temporary authority to investigate claims of federal intimidation. Sir, Patterson said evenly, I need to ask about your interactions with Mrs. Thompson. She's provided evidence of threatening behavior. He showed me a tablet playing doorbell footage, me talking to Laura, edited to make me look aggressive, her voice trembling like prey. "That's not what happened," Tracy blurted. "Josh was polite. She trespassed and took pictures of our property." But the performance had layers. Rob Williams had rebranded as a community liaison officer, and Margaret carried incident reports accusing me of abusing federal credentials. It was so detailed I started to wonder if I was the crazy one. "Mrs. Mitchell," Patterson said softly to Tracy, "you're safe now. Mrs. Thompson's filed for emergency protection." Tracy stared at him, baffled. Protection from what? Josh has never threatened anyone. This is insane. Her honesty only made him more cautious. "It's common for victims to defend abusers," he said gently. Then Laura appeared again. Fresh blouse, makeup perfect, phone raised. "I'm live streaming for transparency," she announced. "People need to see how federal employees silence citizens." Within minutes, her stream blew up. Comments poured in. "He looks dangerous. Call 911. Typical government cover-up." Every time I tried to explain, I sounded guiltier. "This is a misunderstanding," I said. "I'm a federal officer. Let me show you my credentials. See." Laura cut in, turning the camera. "He's using his position to dodge accountability." The chat erupted. Hundreds watched her narrative unfold, one she'd rehearsed for months, down to the tears and phrasing. Even a few skeptical comments drowned under outrage and emojis. Wind pushed through the aspens, chimes rattling as Patterson waited for my answer. For a moment, I heard my academy instructor's voice in my head, reminding me that the truth doesn't always matter if the wrong story gets there first. "Slow your breathing. Ground your feet." I coached myself through the chaos. Tracy squeezed my sleeve, our quiet signal from her school drills. I straightened, speaking with slow, deliberate control. When people pretend authority, they rush. Real authority stays calm. Deputy Patterson examined my credentials, frowning. He knew they were real but didn't know what to do with that truth. "Sir," he said finally, "your position doesn't excuse intimidating residents. Mrs. Thompson has a right to file complaints." Rob nodded like a veteran of rogue agent encounters while Margaret read from her clipboard, 17 fabricated incidents, complete with fake witnesses. "This is made up," I said, but even to my ears it sounded desperate. "Jim," Laura said sweetly, using his first name, "we should move Tracy somewhere safe. She's scared to speak." And just like that, protection turned into custody. Rob and Margaret closed in on my wife. "Wait." Tracy stepped back. "You can't just take me. Josh, tell them." "Honey," Laura crooned, "you're defending him. It's called Stockholm Syndrome." Her live stream crowd ate it up. "Justice for abused women starts now." Audio cut. The sound of handcuffs clicked, my shout echoing, "Stop! Federal agent!" Everything froze. Laura's stream caught it all. Clear, high definition, evidence that would later become crucial. The sound of those cuffs around Tracy's wrists was a gunshot in my head. Everything else, Laura's commentary, the neighbors, Patterson's orders, disappeared. Rob was reciting rights he'd memorized off YouTube while Margaret led my crying wife toward their car. "You're safe now," she said, guiding her like she believed it. "Let me go." Tracy shouted. "I want my husband." Her panic only fueled Laura's audience, who flooded comments cheering on brave rescuers. Something inside me shifted, not rage, but focus. The calm that comes after years of chasing fugitives snapped into place. Josh Mitchell, the husband pleading for reason, vanished. In his place stood Supervisory Deputy U.S. Marshal Josh Mitchell, veteran of 12 interstate arrests and federal operations no one ever reads about. "Stop!" My voice cut through everything. "United States Marshals Service. Everyone freeze." The effect was instant. Rob dropped his phone. Margaret released Tracy like she'd touched fire. Even Laura's narration died mid-sentence. Patterson's hand went to his holster before recognition replaced alarm. "I am Supervisory Deputy Josh Mitchell, U.S. Marshal Service, Colorado District," I announced, credentials raised for both the crowd and Laura's live stream. "You are witnessing the unlawful detention of a federal law enforcement family by individuals impersonating police." I moved with trained precision, positioning myself between them and any exits. Rob Williams. Margaret Williams. You are committing federal kidnapping under Title 18, Section 1201. Release Mrs. Mitchell immediately. The power flipped instantly. Rob fumbled with the cuffs, muttering, "Oh man," while Margaret backed away pale and shaking. Patterson, now back in command, stepped forward, his instincts finally catching up to the truth. "Sir," Patterson said stiffly, "I need to see those credentials again." I handed them over, eyes locked on Laura. For the first time, she was silent behind her camera. "Deputy Patterson," I said evenly, "document this incident for federal review. These individuals are guilty of impersonating law enforcement, unlawful detention, and conspiracy under color of law." I started my own recording, steady and procedural. For the record, Deputy U.S. Marshal Josh Mitchell conducting field documentation of federal crimes committed against Deputy U.S. Marshal Josh Mitchell and spouse Tracy Mitchell, October 14, 2023, at approximately 11:35 a.m. But Laura wasn't finished. Even as her story collapsed, she turned the camera on herself. "This is federal overreach," she told her viewers. "A corrupt agent silencing citizens." Over 500 people were watching, confusion now mixing with outrage. Tracy was free at last, hands shaking, faint red lines on her wrists making my stomach twist. "Are you hurt?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. "Why did they arrest me? What did I do?" I guided her away, still recording. "Deputy Patterson," I said, "I'm placing Laura Thompson, Rob Williams, and Margaret Williams under citizen's arrest for federal crimes. They'll need county holding until marshals arrive." He hesitated. "Sir, maybe we should slow down and sort this out before we start making arrests." Laura pounced. "See? Even local police are scared to challenge federal corruption." None of us realized that dozens of viewers were already clipping the stream, editing our confrontation into a viral spectacle under hashtags like #FederalOverreach and #StandUpToCorruption. 2 hours later, it wasn't our street's problem anymore. It was everywhere: emails, news desks, and inboxes. I'd spent a career dodging judgment from clips instead of reports, but this time, I was the clip. From here on out, every syllable would be audited. Right now, though, all that mattered was that Tracy was safe. Laura was still performing for her camera, still convinced she was the hero. What she didn't realize was that her own stream had become the evidence that would destroy her case, and possibly my career. By the time we stepped inside the cabin, my phone was already buzzing non-stop. The first call came from my supervisor. His voice was flat, controlled, the sound of someone bracing for fallout. "Mitchell," he said, "what the hell is going on? CNN just called. They're running a story about a U.S. Marshal arresting an elderly woman for planting flowers. Tell me there's more to it than that." I looked out the window. Laura was still live, still branding me a corrupt federal agent silencing community activists. The viral spark had ignited the moment my badge appeared on her stream. Someone had clipped the scene, my declaration of authority, and posted it with the caption, "Federal agent threatens elderly woman over flowers." The part where they handcuffed my wife. Cut out. Within 2 hours, the clip had been shared over 2,000 times. Hashtags #Flowergate and #Federal Bullying were trending across 3 states. Political pundits who'd never heard of HOA disputes were calling it a civil rights crisis. Lawyers were offering to represent Laura pro bono. "Sir," I told my supervisor, "they impersonated law enforcement and detained my wife." I followed protocol. Even as I said it, I heard how hollow it sounded. Just another cop defending a bad video. Laura's version was cleaner, louder, easier to believe. The algorithm doesn't care about truth, only outrage. Tracy sat on the couch, scrolling through the comments, her voice small. "Josh, people think you attacked her. They're calling for you to be fired." I sat beside her, watching the feed overflow with fury. Typical federal bully. Power-tripping cop. Fire him. And somewhere in that tide of noise, a new viewer had joined Laura's stream. Someone watching quietly, waiting to turn our nightmare into something much bigger. "This is why we can't trust government agents," one comment read. Poor woman was only protecting her community. The top reply, with over 300 likes, said simply, "Fire this corrupt marshal." I'd seen enough after actions to know how this worked. The first story wins until the paperwork catches up. I called our district's public affairs office and got the expected script: document, don't debate. Don't post. Don't respond to press. Preserve evidence. So I did. I time-stamped every clip neighbors sent, mirrored everything to our case drive, and Tracy, steady as ever, made a list of witnesses in her schoolteacher print. We agreed on one line for callers: we'll provide a formal statement to investigators. No emotion, no color. In a storm of outrage, neutrality keeps you afloat. Meanwhile, the neighborhood itself was quietly turning. Bob Anderson, our next-door neighbor, had filmed the entire confrontation from another angle. His footage showed Rob putting on fake security patches before approaching us, and Laura coaching Margaret on what to say when Patterson arrived. Then Ahmed started digging through county records. He discovered there was no HOA registered here at all. No committee, no enforcement authority, nothing. Bob showed up at our door with his laptop. "Look at this," he said, scrolling through files. Laura's collected over $3,000 in fake HOA fees. She's been running a full-on scam, charging people for violations that don't exist. He showed texts between Laura and Rob, her giving instructions on impersonating security, how to handle homeowners, and even one message reading, "Target acquired." The federal employee thinks he's above community standards. Time to teach him a lesson. Soon, more neighbors came forward. Mrs. Davis had paid a $150 mailbox fine. The Martinez family got threats over their own boat. Others had footage of Laura trespassing with a tape measure, building fake violations to extort money or control landscaping choices. What started as one crazy neighbor had become a full-blown fraud case. By afternoon, Deputy Patterson returned, serious now, apology ready. "Mr. Mitchell, I owe you one. We've confirmed Mrs. Thompson's been impersonating law enforcement and defrauding residents. The prosecutor's filing charges for fraud, impersonation, and unlawful detention." He showed me a folder, fake badges, forged letters, and detailed plans for community intervention operations, targeting whoever she disliked. But while the truth was surfacing offline, Laura's online empire was starting to crumble. Bob had uploaded his footage to the same platforms Laura used, and the narrative flipped fast. Comments changed tone. "Wait, she was charging fake HOA fees? Those badges are plastic. This woman's unhinged." Hashtag Lorelide began trending beside hashtag federal overreach, and her support evaporated overnight. Still, Laura wasn't done. She announced a federal overreach rally for Sunday, promising to stand against tyranny. The stream showed her setting up a makeshift press zone, banners reading "Stop Federal Bullying" and "Community Rights Matter" fluttering like campaign ads. Tracy watched the feed, shaking her head. Even now, she's still playing the victim. I'd seen the type before, people so invested in their own lie that truth feels like betrayal. Laura had built her identity around being the neighborhood savior. Admitting fraud meant destroying herself. Ironically, every word she streamed was more evidence, her own hand crafting the case that would bury her. She thought she was staging a movement. She was really documenting her downfall. By 11:30, around 45 people had shown up. Curious neighbors, a few political activists drawn by social media buzz, and plenty who came just to see Laura Thompson implode in real time. From our cabin window, Tracy and I watched Laura test her mic and shuffle her notes. She wore a crisp blue blazer and white pants, dressed like she was running for office. Handouts about federal overreach and community autonomy sat neatly on each chair. The first crack came when Deputy Patterson's patrol car rolled up, not to arrest me, as Laura had promised, but to serve her. "Mrs. Thompson," he announced clearly, his voice carrying through her own mic, "you're being served with a restraining order prohibiting contact with the Mitchell family. You're also facing criminal charges for fraud, impersonation of a peace officer, and unlawful detention." Laura seized the mic like it was a lifeline. "You see," she shouted, "this is exactly what I've been warning you about. Federal agents using local law enforcement to silence community activists." But Patterson wasn't finished. Reading from his paperwork, he continued, "Our investigation confirms there is no registered homeowners association here, No architectural committee, no enforcement authority. Mrs. Thompson has been defrauding residents by collecting fees for non-existent violations. The crowd's energy evaporated. Folding chairs creaked as people shifted uncomfortably, programs turning into fans in the thin mountain air. A kid on a scooter stopped mid-roll, staring at the banner like it might still explain something. Tracy texted the neighborhood thread, "Save receipts and footage. Let Patterson's team handle it." I stayed near the edge, far enough not to draw focus, watching the slow math unfold across faces. No HOA. No jurisdiction. No authority. When truth lands, it doesn't shout, it just settles and makes the air heavier. Laura's live stream caught all of it. Comments began to sour. Where's the HOA paperwork? Those badges were fake. This woman's unhinged. Her confidence wavered as she tried to spin answers and keep her narrative alive. Then came the mistake that finished her. Trying to prove her case, Laura played her evidence video, a Ring doorbell clip supposedly showing me threatening her. But as the file opened on the big screen, the title flashed clearly, HOA Roleplay V3 Final. MP4. Silence. Then outrage. Roleplay. She made it all up. This is fake. The crowd broke apart. Activists packed their signs, the videographer lowered his camera, and people began leaving without a word. Laura panicked, claiming sabotage, that federal agents had hacked her computer. Her words came faster, more erratic. Then Margaret Williams, pale and trembling, stood up. "I'm sorry," she said into the mic. "Laura told me this was real HOA business. She showed me fake paperwork and convinced me Mr. Mitchell was dangerous. I feel awful. I was misled." The confession cracked everything open. Bob Anderson stepped forward with his laptop, showing receipts of fake fees, text threads of Laura instructing Rob how to pose as security, and county records proving the HOA never existed. Mrs. Davis followed, describing how she'd paid $150 for a mailbox fine that wasn't real. One by one, neighbors came forward, exposing Laura's scam in front of her camera and the watching internet. Still, Laura wouldn't stop streaming. She kept shouting about federal propaganda as her followers vanished, her voice rising higher, thinner, desperate. She thought she was saving her reputation. She was broadcasting its funeral. "They've gotten to all of you," Laura insisted to the 12 people still sitting in folding chairs. "Can't you see what's happening here?" But her final audience, mostly elderly neighbors, only watched her with the quiet discomfort reserved for someone having a public breakdown. The final blow came when Rob Williams arrived, not in his fake uniform but in jeans and a t-shirt, looking like the ex-mall guard he was. He carried a cardboard box and dumped it onto the table, fake badges, clipboards, and forged documents spilling out. "I'm sorry," he told the crowd. "Laura promised me a job reference if I helped with her community standards enforcement. I thought it was real. I didn't know it was illegal." He tore the remaining patches from his jacket and tossed them into the box. By 1 p.m., Laura was talking mostly to herself, and to the dwindling 50 viewers still tuned into her live stream, many watching for the train wreck. The folding chairs were empty, activists gone, her nephew quietly packing up his gear. Still, Laura clung to the microphone, voice cracking but defiant. "I'm filing a formal complaint with the county sheriff," she shouted at the mountains. "This federal agent must be stopped. Emma would want justice." It was the first time she'd mentioned Emma, a name that hung in the air like a confession. No one knew who Emma was, but the pain in Laura's voice said everything. This was never just about flowers or neighborhood rules. Her humiliation was complete. The fake authority, the false enforcement, the delusions, all collapsing live. But grief doesn't vanish when the audience leaves. Her county complaint would either validate her fantasy or become the final piece of evidence that proved her undoing. If you've ever watched someone destroy themselves online and felt that uneasy mix of pity and justice, you'd understand what that moment felt like. Chapter 7, The Final Justice, condensed. 2 weeks after the meltdown, Deputy Patterson called. "We need you at the sheriff's office," he said. "It's the final interview for the Thompson case." Tracy and I drove down on a gray October morning that felt like closure. The sheriff's building tried to look friendly. Modern architecture, glass walls, but the metal detectors reminded you that truth here came with consequences. Patterson met us in the lobby, file in hand, his expression heavier than before. Her county complaint triggered a deeper background check, he said, leading us to a conference room. It uncovered something none of us expected. He opened the file, a police report, photographs, and a death certificate. Laura Thompson's daughter, Emma, had been 19 when she died in a car accident in March 2021. The other driver, a man texting behind the wheel, ran a red light and killed her instantly. He'd received a suspended sentence and community service. According to the psychologist's report, Patterson said, Laura processed her grief by fixating on rule enforcement, believing that if everyone followed rules, her daughter might still be alive. He slid over more documents, photos of our garden, screenshots of Tracy's social media, and detailed notes about federal employees who think they're above community standards. The most chilling was a handwritten letter Laura had never sent to Tracy, claiming she was rescuing her from a dangerous man who didn't respect authority. Tracy's eyes filled with a teacher's quiet sorrow. She really thought you were like the man who killed her daughter, she whispered. Understanding her grief didn't erase what she'd done. Patterson explained that prosecutors were filing charges, impersonation of a peace officer, unlawful detention, and theft by deception, up to 5 years in prison, plus federal charges for civil rights violations and interference with law enforcement. Laura's pain might explain her actions, but it couldn't absolve them. The sentencing came that November, in a courthouse that smelled of old wood and rain. The courthouse looked like every other government building from the 1970s, brown brick, narrow windows, and a kind of forced dignity meant to make justice feel serious. Laura arrived in a navy dress that made her look older and smaller than she had at her rally, accompanied by a weary public defender who clearly wished for another case. Judge Sarah Martinez, a calm woman in her 60s, had read every word of the file and wasn't swayed by Laura's claims of persecution. Mrs. Thompson, she began, you've pled guilty to multiple felonies against your neighbors, including the unlawful detention of a federal officer's spouse. The court recognizes your loss, but grief cannot excuse the harm you've caused. The courtroom was packed with victims of Laura's fake HOA scheme, many nodding as the judge spoke. The sentence matched what Deputy Patterson had predicted. 1 year in county jail, 2 years probation, $5,000 in fines, and $8,000 restitution. She was also ordered to attend grief counseling and stay away from her victims for 5 years. Margaret Williams received 6 months probation and 200 hours of community service. Rob Williams got a year of probation and a course on the legal limits of security work. But the surprise came when the judge announced Laura's restitution would fund a memorial garden for her daughter, Emma, a place for neighbors to remember lives lost too soon. Perhaps your daughter's memory, the judge said, can bring people together instead of tearing them apart. Laura broke down then, her tears finally real. The memorial garden became a project that united the neighborhood in a way her fake HOA never had. Tracy helped design the landscape, adding yellow marigolds that bloomed every spring for Emma. Bob Anderson led fundraising. Mrs. Davis donated a bench engraved with Emma's name. Even Margaret taught kids to garden as part of her service hours. 6 months later, I saw Laura working quietly in the garden, planting flowers with care. Tracy and I paused. Should we say something? She asked. I shook my head. Some healing happens in silence, without the pressure of forgiveness or the illusion that justice must end in friendship. We started visiting the park at dawn. The benches glistened with dew, the gravel crunched like a quiet promise. Tracy's students painted mismatched birdhouses, and a retired welder taught teenagers how to fix a bent gate. Rules and responsibility, we told them, mean little without care, and the lesson stuck better with dirt on their hands than from any lecture. Wind chimes in Emma's garden are made from scrap metal donated by the sheriff's office, pieces of the handcuffs and fake badges Laura once used to control her neighbors. When the wind moves through them, they make a soft, mournful sound, reminding everyone that true memorials aren't about control but about letting go. Laura learned that you can plant flowers without handcuffs. Redemption, it turns out, looks like that, quiet, humble, and focused on growth. Each time the wind passes through Emma's garden, those chimes whisper what justice really means. Not punishment, but knowing when to stop controlling others and start healing yourself.